Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. They always say you get used to the smell. That metallic sting of disinfectant in the air, the cold staleness of scrubbed corridors, the faint plastic tang of fresh nitrile gloves. Maybe after 26 years I should have gotten used to it, but I never did. Name's Raymond Knox. Folks just call me Ray, 61, with knees that creak like old office chairs and a back that hates stairs. I've been the overnight janitor at the Marshall Biocontainment facility in Silver Spring, Maryland, since before most of the lab techs were born. I don't wear a white coat or carry a badge, but I've seen the inside of every corridor in that building. Every spill, every squeaky wheel, every red light that ever flashed on those containment doors. I've been there with a mop and a bucket. That night started like any other. I clocked in at 9:57 p.m., 3 minutes early like always. Passed through the outer checkpoint where Officer Jennings, who never looks up from his crossword, buzzed me in without a glance. "Evenin', Ray," he muttered, scratching something into his little paperback book. I nodded, grabbed my cart, and started the rounds. Level 1 and 2 labs first. They're always a breeze, just regular cleanup. Paper towel bins, floors, coffee stains from those interns who don't know how to use a lid. I had my earbuds in, one side dangling so I could still hear the buzzers if something triggered. NPR was playing some soft-spoken woman talking about the mating habits of sea cucumbers or something equally strange. By the time I made it to the service elevator down to level 4, it was about 12:40 a.m. The lights flickered once. That wasn't normal. Now, let me explain something about Marshall Facility. Level 4 is the real deal, the red zone. Biohazard suits, airlocks, isolated airflow, HEPA scrubbers, the whole 9 yards. We're talking hemorrhagic fevers, synthetic pathogens, and a few things I was never allowed to ask about. My clearance doesn't cover what they store in the deepest wing, Block C, but I know enough to keep my head down and do my job. At 12:43 a.m., I got the page. Janitorial services to Containment Corridor B3. Immediate response required. It was a generic voice. I recorded auto-ping, but the screen flashed red. Not yellow. Red. Now, red means breach. Could be as simple as a technician tearing their suit. Could be worse. I was supposed to wait for a full decon team to clear the room before I went in, but the follow-up message just said, "Biohazard event contained. Area cleared for sanitation." I remember thinking it was weird that the decon team didn't pass me in the hall. Normally, they leave puddles behind. Heavy boots, wet floors, bleach smell, but nothing. The hall leading to B3 was bone dry and dead quiet. The kind of quiet where your ears start ringing just to fill the silence. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the cart handle, trying to shake the feeling crawling up the back of my neck. Even with all the clearances and protocols, I've never liked being down here alone. Level 4 always felt too sealed off, like a vault you weren't supposed to come back from. I moved forward slowly. The overhead fluorescents were still on, humming softly, casting that pale blue-white glow over the cleanroom tiles. Everything in that corridor was surgically clean. Sealed vents, laminate wall panels, no paper, no fibers, no clutter. Just a quiet hallway that terminated in a T intersection, with Lab B3 on the right, across from the primary medical isolation chamber. The closer I got, the more I noticed how nothing looked wrong. No warning tape, no portable fans or biohazard bins, just that red blinking panel by the lab door. Status: containment cleared. I swiped my badge across the access reader. The lock chirped and the airlock opened. 2 inches of reinforced glass and triple-sealed pressure doors swung wide like I was walking into a broom closet. My cart bumped over the threshold, and the auto seal hissed shut behind me. That's when I noticed something strange about the inner corridor. It smelled wrong. Not blood, not rot, just not clean. I'd walked into thousands of sealed spaces before, and you get a sense for when the air isn't right. It had a stale, almost electric odor, like when lightning hits close. You could feel the tension on your skin. Even my mop handle felt heavier. I parked the cart just inside and stepped forward. Ahead of me, the viewing panel for B3 was fogged slightly, like someone had breathed on it from inside. I leaned closer, trying to get a better look, but it was hard to see through the condensation. Then I noticed a smear on the inside. It looked like it had been made with a hand, palm first, then a slow drag downward. It was recent, still wet. That's when I noticed the bio bed inside wasn't empty. There was a man restrained on the gurney, bare-chested, thin, his skin a waxy gray under the harsh lighting. His arms and legs were secured with leather restraints, but his head turned ever so slightly toward the window. His mouth was working, a slow, repetitive twitch of the jaw like he was trying to say something. His eyes were open, unfocused, but locked in my direction. They were dry and wide, pupils dilated so much the irises were almost gone. It wasn't natural. I backed up slightly and reached for the wall intercom, the one that patches into the internal network. Static, no response. That's when I checked my tablet again. Still flashing, area cleared for sanitation. No logs, no incident reports, no clearance codes. I should have left then and there. But instead, I followed protocol like an idiot and popped open the lab entrance. It wasn't locked. No authorization prompt, no second badge swipe. The door opened like a kitchen pantry. That should have been my second warning. Inside, the lights flickered just slightly, and the vents hummed louder. It was colder than usual. There was a stainless utility tray overturned on the floor with scattered syringes, empty gloves, and an open restraint kit. I could see where someone had tried to clean something up. There were smeared streaks on the tile. A dark trail leading toward the door on the far end, the emergency access to the internal elevator shaft. That was sealed. But what caught my eye was the gurney. The man, subject Z001, according to the clipboard, was still strapped in. Barely. His left wrist restraint had been almost torn in half. The leather looked chewed or shredded from the inside. His right leg was twitching in the bonds, muscles spasming like they were running without a brain. His torso was convulsing every few seconds, shallow and rapid, and yet he didn't seem awake. His mouth moved, but not like someone trying to speak. He was mouthing something. Not words, just a grinding motion. Jaw open and shut, open and shut. I took a single step closer. He didn't react. That's when the emergency lights clicked on. The overhead fluorescence blinked out, replaced by a throbbing red pulse. My radio chirped on its own. A shriek of static, followed by a burst of digital noise and then silence. Then he screamed, not like a man, not like pain. It was a full-body convulsion that erupted into a gurgling howl. Wet, broken, like his lungs were full of glass. The sound didn't even echo right. It just slammed into my chest like a physical force. I bolted. I didn't even think. I ran for the exit. Except the lab door, now locked, refused to open. The handle clicked but wouldn't disengage. My badge didn't register. That was when I saw the gurney was empty. I don't remember crossing the room. I barely remember grabbing the tray and hurling it. Something metallic crashed. I turned and flung open the emergency decon chamber, praying the auto sensors still worked. By the time I slammed it shut, the thing, whatever it was inches from the outer window. He didn't slam against it. He just pressed his face to the glass and stared. Not at me, through me. I stayed in the airlock for a long time. Couldn't move, could barely breathe. When the system finally cycled and unlocked the inner door, I slipped into maintenance shaft 3C and locked it behind me with a rusted handwheel and a mop handle jammed into the teeth. That's where I stayed for what felt like hours. No radio, no updates. Just alarms echoing through the walls and the faint scrape of something moving through the corridor outside. Eventually, I realized I couldn't sit in that shaft forever. The ventilation system wasn't designed for occupation. It had positive pressure but no fresh air return. My nose was already burning from the chemical residue in the shaft's filters. I pulled out my phone. Zero signal, no Wi-Fi. Even the lab's internal wireless was down. That meant something massive had gone offline. For the Marshall facility, that was catastrophic. They don't just lose power. Everything is triple redundant. Diesel backup, battery failovers, hardwired fiber from the NIH hub 3 miles away. For everything to go dark at once meant a full structure lockdown or sabotage. I needed to get to the control room. That meant crawling through the shaft grid. Manual access all the way to Sector A1, near the perimeter. I mapped it out in my head. Shaft 3C curved left into the maintenance crawlway, which looped behind the main vivarium and then into sub-basement support near cryo-storage. There was a duct that connected to the inner control room's underfloor cabling trough. I opened the first hatch carefully. There was no sound beyond the metal. I stepped out slowly, holding my flashlight with one hand and the heavy crowbar I kept zip-tied to the side of my janitor cart in the other. It was old. A gift from a technician who quit after a false anthrax alarm back in 03. She told me, "Ray, sometimes it's better to carry something made of steel than trust a laminated badge." I'd always laughed. I wasn't laughing now. I made it 2 corridors down before I saw my first body. Dr. Simmons. Young guy, virologist. Wore glasses so thick they looked bulletproof. I found him slumped against a containment locker. He wasn't torn up. No blood. Just wide eyes and a dark smear of something leaking from his nose and ears. His skin had turned gray-green, mottled. His ID badge was snapped in half like someone had grabbed him by the lanyard and ripped it loose. There was no pulse. His fingers were curled, stiff, like he'd died clutching something invisible. I backed away slowly. The hallway lights were out. Only the blinking emergency strips at the baseboards were still glowing, red and green alternating every few seconds. I ducked into the comms alcove to check the manual override panel. No signal. But I did get one thing. A printed note, half jammed into the panel, torn and marked in thick Sharpie. If Z001 is loose, don't use the elevators. Take the crawlspace to Section C. Mercer is alive. She's trying to reboot from sub-control. Mercer, Dr. Eileen Mercer. The voice I'd heard on the radio. She was the facility's deputy director and the most no-nonsense woman I've ever met. If she was still trying to get things back online, I needed to find her. Maybe she'd know what this was. What this thing was that used to be a man strapped to a gurney. If anyone had access to the core systems, backup vaults, or manual lockdown overrides, it would be Mercer. She knew every inch of the Level 4 wing better than most of the architects who designed it. And more importantly, she'd never panic. The problem was getting to her. Section C was 2 full corridors over, separated by a fireproof steel bulkhead that triggered during containment breaches. The only open path, if the elevators were down, and they were, was the crawlspace grid. It ran under the lab like a metallic intestine, barely tall enough to crouch in, lined with electrical conduits, rusted grates, and a tangle of coolant lines wrapped in fiberglass insulation. It was built for techs, not 61-year-old men with worn-out knees and a flashlight that flickered more than it glowed. I pulled open the first maintenance hatch near the comms alcove and ducked inside. My back scraped against the low ceiling immediately, and the air was suffocating, hot, stale, and filled with the scent of old lubricant and machine oil. I had to move on my hands and knees, dragging the crowbar behind me. Every few feet I stopped and listened, ears straining for any movement. The deeper I went, the quieter it became, until all I could hear was the soft mechanical pulse of server cooling fans and the occasional groan of the ductwork expanding under pressure. As I crawled, I passed junctions, labeled in faded stencil paint, JNT, C1, C2, and finally C4. That one led into the sub-control room, an auxiliary center tied to the building's HVAC, automated fire suppression, door controls, and most of the emergency backup protocols. It wasn't the master system, but it could do a lot. Enough to possibly lift the internal lockdown or at least re-establish contact with the surface. I hit the panel on the inside of the hatch, nothing. No power. I wedged my crowbar under the lip and forced the door open with a groan of metal. Dust and grit rained down. I slid out into the dim orange glow of the emergency lights and immediately noticed the scorch marks on the far wall. Something had exploded in here recently. One of the power inverters looked blown, charred metal, fractured capacitors. The floor was slick with coolant and what looked like blood. But it was old, drying, sticky on the tiles. And there she was. Dr. Mercer was crouched in front of a server rack near the back, sleeves rolled up, face smeared with ash. She held a tablet in one hand, manually plugging in bypass cables with the other. She didn't even look up. "Ray, took you long enough?" I stared at her, stunned. "How did you—" "I hardwired the motion sensor in the duct. You kicked dust through the vent at JNTC3, left a trail like a breadcrumb." I stepped forward slowly, eyeing the damage. "Is that blood?" "Some of it's mine," she said, then winced as she rotated her arm. Her left sleeve was ripped open and there was a deep gash near the elbow, hastily wrapped with a torn bandage. "Most of it isn't." "What happened?" Mercer didn't answer right away. She connected a final lead, and one of the small monitors flickered to life. She scanned it, fingers flying across the screen, then finally turned to me. "Subject Z001, reanimated during sedation. Cardiac arrest at 0207. Movement detected on biomonitors at 0211. We'd already begun prepping for autopsy. He, whatever he is, shouldn't be alive. He shouldn't be able to move." I knelt next to her. "It's not just him." She nodded grimly. "I figured. When the lights went out, the quarantine gates failed. That means anyone, still infected in blocks B and D might have gotten loose." "Do we even know what it is?" I asked. "Pathogen profiles inconsistent. Started as a retrovirus vector. They were modifying it to simulate viral latency in aggressive hemorrhagic strains, part of a DARPA contract. Then something mutated during the second-gen testing, and they tested it on a person." Mercer looked at me hard. He volunteered. Late-stage lymphoma patient. Military background. Subject Z001 was supposed to be a terminal case, but after injection, his vitals stabilized. Tumors shrank. He started regenerating tissue. That sounds like a miracle. It was, for 72 hours. Then he flatlined and got back up. Mercer sighed. "Ray, this thing bypasses the nervous system. It hijacks the brainstem directly, keeps the muscles firing long after clinical death. But it's not just reflex. There's targeting behavior, pursuit, basic coordination. I stood up, scanning the room. So we're locked in here with… What? A dead man who wants to hunt? She shook her head. We're locked in here with a dozen. We had at least 6 experimental subjects in B-Wing, 2 more in isolation. And if any of the techs got bitten, scratched, exposed through the HVAC… She let the implication hang. I turned toward the small access terminal next to the server rack. Can this system override the main lockdown? No, she said, but it can unlock the inner corridor to the armory. You mean the lab doesn't just leave loaded rifles lying around? She gave me a tired look. We're a pathogen facility, Ray, not a prison. But yes, there's a biometric locked weapons locker next to the containment response bay, 2 suppressed MP5s, 1 pump shotgun, and some flashbangs. Enough to maybe get us to the security core if we move fast. The lights flickered above us. One of the overhead fans kicked back on, then off again, sputtering like it was trying to breathe. I can trigger the unlock, Mercer said, already typing. But once I do, we'll have about 90 seconds before the corridor systems revert. Then the security shutters come down again, and we'll be stuck. Then let's not waste time. She hit the button. The panel turned green for a moment, then a clunk echoed down the ductwork. Metal latches disengaging in the corridor outside. We slipped back into the crawlway and made our way through the narrow junctions to the secondary service hall. The whole building felt different now, like the air had weight. No sounds, just the distant thrum of something big moving above us, or below. It was hard to tell. We emerged into the corridor and moved fast. Mercer led, limping slightly but still sharp. I followed with the crowbar raised, eyes scanning every corner. The lights were red, pulsing slowly as if the walls were breathing. The weapons locker was behind a wall panel marked Emergency Response Module Authorized Access Only. Mercer placed her palm on the sensor and waited. The biometric scanner chirped, then the steel panel slid back. She grabbed one of the MP5s, a slim black submachine gun with a suppressor already attached. She handed me the shotgun. Mossberg 590, pistol grip, 5-round tube mag. I checked the chamber. Empty. Mercer passed me a box of 12-gauge shells. Slugs, not buckshot. Precision overspread. Only 30 rounds, she said. Make them count. That's when we heard it. From down the corridor, beyond the bend. A scraping, followed by a low groan. Not vocal, not even human. Just the sound of pressure and weight against steel. Something was dragging. We fell back into position, weapons raised, and crouched behind the blast shield alcove at the junction. The corridor ahead was cast in shadow. The red emergency lights didn't reach that far. I strained to see. Then it moved. It came around the corner like it was sleepwalking. A figure in a torn level 4 hazmat suit, visor cracked, hood soaked with something black. His arms were slack, but his head tilted as he turned toward us. Then he ran, not stumbled ran. Full sprint. Arms flailing, legs pumping unnaturally fast. I fired. The slug caught him center mass. He flew back against the wall but immediately started rising again. I racked the pump and aimed higher. Second shot took him through the visor. The head snapped back. This time he stayed down. But more were coming. We could hear them now. Movement on both ends of the corridor, faster. More feet. Some dragging, others pounding like they knew the walls. Their bodies slammed against doors, scratched at vent covers, shrieked against the steel. "Back," Mercer shouted. "Service stairwell, go." We turned and sprinted. Behind us, one of the vent covers burst open and something crawled out. I didn't look, I just ran. We dove into the stairwell and slammed the door shut. Mercer jammed the locking pin in place just as the first impact hit, Something howled on the other side, then pounded once, twice, then stopped. I pressed my back to the wall, gasping, sweat running down my neck despite the cold. For a few seconds, we just listened. Silence, but not peace. The kind of silence that suggests watching eyes, a held breath before another rush. Mercer stood up straight, cradling her MP5 with both hands, her face flushed and jaw tight. "We can't go back through that corridor," she muttered. "They'll spread to the north wing if they haven't already." "How many?" I started to ask, but she cut me off. "No way to know. We had 7 test subjects in cryo-deep, 2 in active containment, and—" She paused, eyes scanning up the stairwell. More than 50 staff on site when the breach triggered. Half of them didn't make it out. The infection's fast. Blood to brainstem in minutes. They don't just go feral, they hunt. I followed her up 2 levels, past the sub-basement, until we reached a steel door labeled Core Services Isolation Access. It led to the facility's spinal column, the networked operations hub that connected all secure labs, containment zones, data centers, and server vaults. Normally, no one used this route except technicians or emergency response teams, and even then only when the standard lifts were offline. I'd cleaned it exactly once during my 26 years here, and even then only the entry platform. Past that was rabbit-worn of blast doors, utility tunnels, and narrow walkways suspended above storage tanks and fluid filtration units. The air was warmer here, thicker, and the scent of rust was stronger than anywhere else in the building. Mercer slid her badge across the reader. The scanner pulsed once, blinked red, then went dead. "Power relays fried," she said quietly. She stepped back, then looked at me. I didn't even wait for her to ask. I wedged the crowbar into the seam beneath the panel and leaned into it with everything I had. The lock groaned but held. Mercer fired 2 rounds directly into the latch, and with another shove from me, the door finally broke open with a sharp, metallic shriek. The space beyond was pitch black. We stepped into the dark. My flashlight flickered to life, casting a narrow beam through the corridor. Rows of thick insulated pipes ran along the ceiling. Below our feet, grating lined the walkway, clattering with each step. Underneath, 50 feet down, I could see the glint of fluid tanks and pressure valves, the deep filtration system that regulated airflow and water supply across the entire research wing. Somewhere down there, pumps still worked. I could hear the low thump of hydraulics and the occasional pop of pressure equalizing. "I need to reach the secure node," Mercer said, pointing left. "It's the only system left with a hardened power source and analog backup. If we can reach it, I can initiate a manual lockdown of every sector. We'll trap whatever's moving inside, at least buy time." "Buy time for what?" I asked, voice low. Mercer didn't answer. She didn't have to. There wasn't going to be a rescue. We kept moving through the dark. The corridor narrowed as we reached the old server wing. Most of the racks were powered down, the cooling fans silent, data lights dead. We passed what used to be the radio backup array, a room filled with unplugged monitors and detached hard drives. Somebody had tried to wipe everything, probably in a panic. Eventually, we reached the end of the platform and found another sealed door labeled Secure Node 03, Authorized Clearance Only. Mercer reached for her ID, but before she could swipe it, we heard a sound behind us. Faint at first, then clearer. Footsteps, not rushed, slow, deliberate, like someone who knew where they were going. We turned. I raised the shotgun. Mercer crouched low and back to the wall. The light from my flashlight hit the corner just as the figure emerged. It was another staff member, what was left of one. Dr. Herrick, I realized, one of the bioinformatics analysts. His lab coat was soaked in something dark, torn near the shoulder. His head hung slightly to the side like the muscles had forgotten how to hold it up. But his eyes weren't dead, they weren't alive either. They were fixed, empty, locked in a permanent stare. He didn't growl, didn't scream, he just moved. Fast. I fired. The slug hit him high in the chest, spinning him sideways, but he got up again before I could rack another round. He was on me in a heartbeat, hands clawing for the barrel. I shoved back, falling into the railing. The grating underfoot shook violently. One more shot, this time point blank to the neck, finally put him down. The body slumped, then twitched once and went still. I breathed hard, hands shaking. Mercer was already at the door, overriding the lock with a manual key from a hidden panel. Inside, she hissed. We entered the secure node and slammed the reinforced lock shut behind us. The room was cold, sealed, its own atmosphere separate from the rest of the wing. In the center stood the analog operations console, a hardened steel cabinet housing physical circuit breakers, manual dials, backup tapes, and a dual-layer switchboard used only in the event of total digital collapse. Mercer moved quickly, pulling breakers and spinning dials. Lights flickered overhead. The hum of deep systems coming back online vibrated through the floor. A map appeared on the central display, showing the facility layout. Color-coded segments, many already blinking red. Lab 7B, compromised. Wing D, overrun. Upper control, unresponsive. Cryostorage, breached. But something caught my eye. An alert flashing in green, only one. Sub-level maintenance. Access, door C7 breached. Outbound lock opened. I pointed. That's an external lock. Mercer turned. Impossible. That hatch leads to the old utility culvert. It hasn't been used in years. Sealed after the last seismic inspection. Not anymore. She tapped the screen. It blinked again. Door open, no seal status. We looked at each other in silence. A quiet understanding passed between us. Whatever had broken containment, it was no longer contained. The rest of the night passed in fragments. We spent the next hours sealing what we could, locking down remaining corridors, watching the infection map expand sector by sector. We tried to patch into the surface, but the satellite uplink had been manually disconnected. Someone had wanted the facility isolated. I found security logs showing deletion timestamps around the same window the power went down. No usernames, no IPs, just blank entries. Mercer stayed focused, driven. I think it was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. She walked me through protocols I never knew existed. Emergency gas suppression in the lower labs, electromagnetic scrubbers in the virology wing, analog deadlocks on each sublevel. We threw everything we could at the infection. And still it spread. At 5:12 a.m., we lost to the medical bay. We watched the security feed as one of the nurses, Carly, I think, was pulled through the sliding door by two infected in shredded biosuits. We cut the feed, not because of the horror, but because it didn't matter anymore. By 6:30, the internal map had gone nearly full red. Only 3 zones remained green. Our secure node, the data vault beneath cryostorage, and a single environmental chamber tied to the insect pathology wing, ironically one of the oldest and most airtight rooms in the facility. We could stay, maybe for hours, a day at most. But when the backup batteries died, that would be it. No air, no lights, no seals. At 7:42 a.m., Mercer made her call. We prepped 2 filtered rebreathers from the emergency supply cache and loaded up the weapons we had left. I still had 6 shells. She had 2 full mags. We took a sealed decontamination kit, iodine tablets, and a sat phone from the wall locker. non-functional but maybe repairable outside. We would leave through the culvert. It was the only path left. We opened the secure node for the last time and stepped back into the dark corridors. The infected were gone. The halls were silent again. Not empty. Just waiting. When we reached door C7, the hatch was already open. Beyond it, a sloped concrete tunnel curved in darkness. Old water lines hung from the ceiling. Emergency glow paint still flickered on the walls from a time decades ago. It smelled like rot and dust and something far older than the infection. We didn't speak as we stepped into the tunnel. The hatch closed behind us with a deep, metallic clang. We didn't look back. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.